First contact. The Galactic Concordat had maintained order among the stars for 14 millennia before humans arrived. I am Velixan, Chief Archivist of the Grand Repository, and I was there when they first appeared at our borders. Tiny vessels of primitive design that nonetheless had somehow mastered faster-than-light travel, using methods our scientists had never conceived. Those first encounters became legend almost overnight. The humans, as they called themselves, approached the galaxy not with the caution of newcomers, but with the boundless curiosity of children discovering a new playground. Their first diplomatic mission sent shockwaves through the Concordat. While other species spent decades in observation before requesting membership, humans simply appeared at the Central Assembly on Nexus Prime with a handwritten note, actual physical ink on processed plant fiber, requesting a friendly chat about joining the neighborhood. They cannot be serious. High Chancellor Zivtorax of the Adurian Dominion hissed through specialized breathing apparatus. They've barely left their solar system. They have no understanding of our protocols, our hierarchies. The humans merely smiled, that peculiar facial contortion that we would all come to recognize as either their greatest diplomatic weapon or most disarming cultural quirk. Their lead representative, Ambassador Sarah Chen, simply shrugged, another uniquely human gesture, and said, "We're quick learners." This casual dismissal of established order characterized everything humans did. The Concordat had carefully constructed societal classifications for every member species. The militaristic Vangari served as the galaxy's warriors. The methodical Quarian maintained technological advancement. The empathic Liraxi handled diplomatic relations. Each species knew its place, its function, its boundaries. Humans refused any classification whatsoever. "But what is your species' primary contribution?" demanded Grand Minister Elkar during the second formal assessment of Earth's application. Ambassador Chen looked genuinely confused. "We do a bit of everything, I suppose." "Impossible," Elkar responded. "No species can excel across multiple disciplines. It defies evolutionary specialization principles." "Well," Chen replied with that infuriating smile, "nobody told us that." Their homeworld, Earth, was unremarkable, a water-rich terrestrial planet around an average star. But the species it produced was anything but average. Humans possessed physical resilience that approached Vangari levels, problem-solving capabilities that rivaled the Quarian, and an intuitive understanding of emotional dynamics that sometimes surpassed even the Liraxi. They were, by any reasonable metric, mediocre at everything yet somehow exceptional in combination. Within 2 decades of their arrival, humans had established outposts on 17 worlds, a modest territory by Concordat standards. Yet their influence extended far beyond their borders. Human mediation techniques resolved the 1,000-year Vangari-Tholian border dispute in less than a month. Human engineers developed a workaround for the Quarian energy crisis in a single afternoon. "We just tried hooking it up backwards," the lead engineer explained. To the Quarians' collective disbelief, human artists created works that moved even the stoic Druzen to displays of emotion. They were everywhere, involved in everything, respecting nothing yet helping everyone. "They are chaos embodied," my predecessor, Archivist Kiven, wrote in his private journals. "They acknowledge no rigid structures, follow no predictable patterns, yet their interventions create order from disorder. They are the paradox that somehow works." Most confounding was their system of governance. Unlike the carefully structured hierarchies of Concordat worlds, humans maintained a patchwork of different governmental styles across their colonies. Some were democratic, others maintained loose monarchies, while still others operated as cooperative communes. When asked how such disparate systems could possibly function together, Ambassador Chen replied, "We argue a lot, but we figure it out." This casual approach to discord was perhaps their most alien feature. Where other species avoided conflict through careful protocol and established hierarchies, humans seemed to thrive on disagreement. Their diplomatic corps frequently engaged in heated debates in full view of foreign dignitaries, yet emerged with unified positions. Their engineering teams incorporated conflicting designs rather than selecting a single approach. Their military strategy evolved through constant internal challenge rather than centralized command. They are fractious by nature, yet stronger for it, noted High General Kurtek of the Vanguard after observing human military exercises. They do not break when bent. The ascended matriarchs of the telepathic Laraxi were the first to recognize the true nature of humanity's strength. They are not specialized because they are adapted for change itself. Matriarch Selena declared during the historic classification debate, "While we have evolved to fill stable ecological niches in a relatively unchanging galaxy, humans evolved on a world of constant environmental flux. They are living adaptations." This insight came as humans continued their uncanny ability to solve problems that had stumped concordat species for generations. The toxic atmospheric degradation on Venderi Prime, deemed irreversible by Korean scientists, was resolved by a human agricultural specialist who introduced modified algae that processed the pollutants into oxygen. The intractable religious conflict between the northern and southern Merzai was diffused when a human anthropologist identified a shared mythological figure both sects had forgotten. Their approach was never systematic, never predictable. They didn't solve problems through superior intelligence or advanced technology, but through what they called thinking outside the box, a phrase that required 16 hours of explanation before the Concordat's translation matrix could properly process it. Perhaps most troubling to the established order was humanity's casual disregard for protocol. When humans disagreed with Concordat policies, they simply ignored them. Not through formal channels of protest, not through diplomatic maneuvering, but through what appeared to be inattention. The regulations regarding restricted technology transfer clearly state, began High Minister T. Locks during one particularly heated session. "Yeah, we read those," interrupted Commander Jackson, Earth's military liaison. "They're short-sighted. We've shared medical nanotechnology with the failing colonies because they're dying of radiation poisoning. We can argue about the policy after they're not dying anymore." This infuriating approach, acting first and discussing later, violated thousands of years of careful diplomatic balance. Yet somehow, the galaxy kept shifting to accommodate them. Rules that had stood for millennia were amended, not through formal processes, but through the gradual acknowledgement that perhaps, in specific cases, the humans had a point. By their third decade in the Concordat, humanity had become both indispensable and impossible. Their territories remained modest, their population a mere fraction of the major powers, yet their influence continued to grow. Human mediators were requested for every major dispute. Human engineers were consulted on projects far beyond their technical classification. Human merchants established unlikely trade routes between traditionally hostile regions. They infiltrated every level of galactic society not through conquest or manipulation, but through helpfulness. It was insidious precisely because it was genuine. They simply wanted to fix things. As I review the archives of this period, one exchange stands out, recorded during the infamous resource allocation crisis when the Drellin asteroid belt collapsed, threatening the stability of 7 planetary orbits. The Concordat Assessment Committee spent 6 months calculating the precise distribution of responsibility and cost, producing a 17,000-page report with proportional obligations for each member species. Ambassador Chen reviewed it for less than an hour before addressing the assembly. "This is too complicated," she said. "It is comprehensive," corrected Grand Minister Elkar. "It's paralyzing," Chen replied. "While we're arguing about who pays for what, those planets are still at risk. Earth will cover the immediate stabilization costs. We'll sort out the paperwork later." The assembly erupted in procedural objections. Such unilateral action violated Concordat principles of collective decision-making. It undermined the authority of the assessment committee. It created dangerous precedent. Every objection was technically correct, yet within days, human ships were already deploying gravitational stabilizers throughout the Drellin system while the debate continued. This, perhaps more than anything, encapsulated humanity's place in the galactic order. They were simultaneously the most cooperative and most disruptive force the Concordat had ever encountered. They played by no recognizable rules, yet somehow made the game better for everyone involved. No one could have predicted what would happen next, how quickly everything would change, how deeply the galaxy would come to understand what humanity truly meant to us all. But I was there when it happened. I was there when humanity walked away. The Protectors. Humanity's unorthodox approach to galactic politics reached its apex in what historians now call the Protection Era. I remember clearly the first manifestation of this phenomenon. The Thraxi Confederacy, a minor power known primarily for their aggressive mining operations, had begun systematically stripping resources from Nebulon IV, a pre-spaceflight civilization's homeworld. Under Concordat law, such exploitation was technically legal. The Nebulonians lacked FTL technology and thus had no recognized galactic standing. The Concordat Council debated intervention for 16 cycles, producing endless position papers and risk assessments. During the 17th cycle of debate, 3 human ships simply appeared in Nebulon orbit. "What are you doing?" demanded Thraxi High Commander Vexurian via emergency transmission to the Concordat. "The humans are interfering with our legally sanctioned extraction operation." The emergency session that followed remains one of the most viewed recordings in our archives. Ambassador Chen intoned Grand Minister Elkar, her crystalline form vibrating with barely contained outrage. "Please explain why human vessels have entered Nebulon space without Concordat authorization." Chen's expression remained placid. "We're not interfering with Thraxi operations. We're simply offering the Nebulonians information about what's happening to their planet. That violates non-interference protocols," hissed Commander Vexurian. "Does it?" Chen asked, genuinely curious. "We reviewed the protocols carefully. They prohibit providing advanced technology or disrupting natural cultural development. They say nothing about explaining to a species why their seas are turning toxic and their wildlife is dying." "The implications," began Grand Minister Elkar. "The implications," Chen interrupted, "are that the Thraxi might have to actually compensate the Nebulonians for the resources they're taking, rather than silently stealing them while the Concordat debates whether theft from non-advanced species counts as theft." The legal loophole was infuriating, brilliant, and entirely typical of human diplomatic strategy. Within days, the Thraxi found themselves negotiating directly with Nebulon tribal leaders, who now fully understood the value of their planet's resources, while human diplomats helpfully mediated. This pattern repeated across a dozen systems. Wherever exploitation occurred, human ships appeared, never threatening violence, never directly interfering, but making their presence known and ensuring information flowed freely to those who needed it most. They called themselves observers, but everyone recognized what they truly were: protectors. Admiral Corzin of the Vangari Defense Fleet called an emergency session of the Military Command Council after the third such intervention. The recording of his address reveals the conflicted response humanity generated among even the most militant Concordat species. "These humans are disrupting the natural order," Corzin growled, massive fists pounding the strategy table. "They have no authorization to deploy forces. They follow no chain of command." General Thax, his second-in-command, shifted uncomfortably. "Yet they've prevented 3 conflicts without firing a single shot." "That's not the point," Corzin roared. "The point is they're operating outside the system, without structure, without hierarchy." "Perhaps," ventured Subcommander Merax hesitantly, "that's precisely why they're effective where we are not." The silence that followed spoke volumes. The greatest military minds in the galaxy were beginning to recognize what many already suspected. Humanity's apparent chaos concealed a deeper pattern, one that operated on different principles than the rigid structures of Concordat governance. The protection phenomenon expanded. Human diplomatic teams appeared on worlds suffering political oppression, offering nothing but cultural exchange that somehow always included information about alternative governance systems. Human medical ships arrived at disease-stricken colonies with experimental treatments that regulatory committees had deemed too risky despite proven effectiveness. Human engineers helped outlying settlements develop local power solutions that reduced dependence on core world energy monopolies. In each case, humanity operated just within the boundaries of Concordat law, or at least within interpretations creative enough to create plausible deniability. The pattern culminated in the Xanteri crisis. The methane-breathing Xanteri had occupied 311 colony worlds, displacing millions. The Concordat Security Council authorized a limited peacekeeping force, but political complications delayed deployment for months while the situation deteriorated. Ambassador Chen requested an emergency address to the full Concordat Assembly. The recording shows her unusual solemnity as she took the central podium. "While we debate," she said quietly, "children are dying. Not metaphorically, not potentially. Right now, at this moment, children are dying while we talk about jurisdiction and proportional response." She activated a holographic display showing real-time footage from refugee camps. The images were shocking, deliberately so. Humanity has authorized the deployment of our entire 7th Fleet to the Xanteri conflict zone. They will depart Earth space in 6 hours. Grand Minister Elkar's crystalline form vibrated so intensely that several facets cracked, a sign of extreme distress among her species. "You cannot. The Security Council has not." "We're not asking permission," Chen interrupted. "We're extending an invitation. Any Concordat vessels that wish to join our humanitarian mission are welcome. We will either go together or humanity will go alone. But we are going." The silence that followed was so complete that the ambient sound processors in the assembly hall registered only the background hum of life support systems. Then, remarkably, High General Kritek of the Vangari stood. "The Vangari 3rd Battle Group will accompany your fleet." One by one, representatives from 17 species pledged support. What began as a human act of defiance transformed into the largest joint military operation in Concordat history, all without formal authorization from the established governance structure. The operation succeeded brilliantly. The Xanteri withdrew under the combined pressure, and the displaced 11s returned home with minimal casualties. The precedent, however, sent shockwaves through the galactic political system. They'd fundamentally altered the balance of power, my predecessor noted in his private journals. Not through conquest or dominance, but by simply deciding that consensus was less important than action. In the cycles that followed, humanity's approach became increasingly formalized. The Concordat, rather than continuing to resist, began adapting to accommodate human methods. The Rapid Response Protocol, allowing for expedited intervention in humanitarian crises, passed unanimously, a tacit acknowledgement that perhaps the humans had been right all along. Humanity's influence grew exponentially despite their limited territorial holdings. Human representatives were appointed to previously restricted committees. Human peacekeeping forces were integrated into Concordat security operations. Human diplomatic practices, direct, sometimes uncomfortably honest, became increasingly common in interspecies negotiations. They had, in essence, reformed the Concordat from within, not through revolution, but through persistent, principled action that made the existing system's flaws impossible to ignore. Yet even as humanity reached the height of their influence, signs of trouble emerged. The Thraxi Confederacy, still smarting from the Nebulon humiliation, began building unprecedented military forces along their borders. The resource-rich cartel of merchant worlds implemented trade restrictions that disproportionately affected human colonies. The technologically superior Quarian became increasingly secretive about their advanced research, particularly in weapons development. A coalition was forming, not openly hostile, but increasingly resentful of humanity's growing influence and disregard for traditional power structures. Ambassador Chen recognized the danger. In a private communication to Earth's government that was only declassified centuries later, she warned, "We're changing the galaxy faster than some can tolerate. We need to proceed with caution. Humanity, for once, attempted to slow their pace of innovation. They withdrew some of their more controversial proposals for Concordat reform. They reduced their unilateral protection operations. They made genuine efforts to work within established channels. It was too late. The coalition against them continued to grow, and even their allies became uncertain. The Vangari, once humanity's strongest supporters, began to question the long-term implications of human influence on galactic culture. They make us question traditions that have served us for millennia. High General Kurtek admitted in a closed session of the Vangari High Command. Perhaps that is necessary. Perhaps that is dangerous. I no longer know which. This was the state of affairs when the Meridian incident occurred, the catalyst that would change everything, the moment when humanity's patience finally reached its limit. None of us realized at the time just how completely the galaxy was about to transform. The departure. The Meridian system was unremarkable. 5 planets orbiting a yellow dwarf star at the edges of Concordat space. Its third planet, a temperate world with abundant water and a nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere, had been colonized jointly by humans and the aquatic Nelvorians 2 decades earlier. With a population of barely 30,000, it barely registered in galactic politics. Until the virus appeared. The pathogen defied classification. Neither fully biological nor synthetic, it spread through Meridian's water systems with terrifying speed. Nelvorian colonists, with their aquatic biology, were particularly vulnerable. Within weeks, 3,000 Nelvorians had died horrible deaths, their cellular structures literally dissolving from within. Emergency medical teams identified the virus as artificial, a bioweapon of remarkable sophistication. The human colonists, partly immune due to their terrestrial biology, worked tirelessly alongside Nelvorian survivors to contain the outbreak. They requested urgent assistance from the Concordat Biocontainment Division. What followed is documented in excruciating detail in the official transcripts. The Biocontainment Division, controlled by the Thraxi-led coalition, delayed deployment while assessing contamination risks. The Quarian Medical Council requested additional study data before authorizing treatment protocols. The merchant cartel placed Meridian under quarantine embargo, preventing private relief efforts from reaching the colony. Every delay was justified through proper channels. Every obstruction was technically within regulatory guidelines. The coalition never openly refused assistance. They simply ensured it arrived too slowly to matter. Ambassador Chen requested an emergency session of the Concordat Assembly. Breaking with all diplomatic protocol, she bypassed the formal speaking queue and took the central podium without recognition. "We have confirmed evidence," she announced, her voice unnaturally steady, that the Meridian virus was engineered in Thraxi military laboratories. The chamber erupted. High Commander Vexurian of the Thraxi demanded proof. Chen provided it. Comprehensive molecular analysis, communication intercepts, financial records tracking payment to rogue bioengineers. The evidence was overwhelming. This was a targeted attack. Chen continued once the uproar subsided. Not just against human colonists, but specifically against our Nelvorian partners. The Thraxi have long claimed that interspecies colonization violates natural order. They've now weaponized that belief. What should have followed was immediate Concordat intervention, sanctions, reparations, possibly even military action against the Thraxi leadership. Instead, Grand Minister Elkar called for a thorough investigation through proper channels. The recording of what followed has been viewed more times than any other archive file in our repository. Chen stood perfectly still at the podium, her expression transforming from righteous anger to something far more disturbing, quiet disappointment. "We have given the Concordat every opportunity to be better than this," she said softly. "We have worked within your systems. We have respected your traditions. We have compromised our own values to accommodate your caution." She looked around the chamber, making deliberate eye contact with representatives from every major species. 8,543 people are dead, not from natural disaster. not from accident. They were murdered. And you, all of you, are more concerned with maintaining political balance than with justice. Grand Minister Elkar attempted to interrupt, but Chen continued as if she hadn't spoken. Humanity joined this concordat believing we had found a community of equals, different in form and culture, but united in core principles. We were wrong. Her next words were delivered so quietly that the audio enhancement systems had to amplify them. We're done. The silence that followed was absolute. Earth formally withdraws from the Galactic Concordat, effective immediately. All human representatives to Concordat institutions will depart within 3 standard cycles. All human territories are now closed to Concordat vessels. All existing agreements between human authorities and Concordat members are hereby terminated. High Commander Vexurian laughed, a harsh, barking sound that echoed through the chamber. You cannot survive alone. Your territories are too small, your resources too limited. Chen's expression didn't change. We survived alone for thousands of years before we met you. We will survive alone again. She stepped away from the podium, but paused at the chamber entrance for one final statement. You needed us far more than we needed you. You just don't know it yet. Within days, the withdrawal began. Human diplomatic personnel departed from every Concordat institution. Human merchants terminated trade agreements worth trillions. Human scientists withdrew from collaborative research initiatives. Human peacekeeping forces returned to Earth space. Most shocking was the evacuation of human colonies and shared systems. Hundreds of thousands of humans simply abandoned homes and businesses, taking only what they could carry, boarding massive transport vessels bound for Earth space. The economic disruption was immediate and catastrophic. Entire industrial sectors collapsed without human engineers. Medical facilities lost critical personnel overnight. The Concordat leadership attempted to portray the withdrawal as temporary, a diplomatic maneuver designed to extract concessions. They will return when reason prevails, Grand Minister Elkar assured the Assembly. Economic reality will force their hand. The Thraxi were more openly celebratory. The natural order reasserts itself, High Commander Vexurian declared. Species will once again know their proper place. Even humanity's closest allies seemed uncertain how to respond. The Vangari continued honoring their military alliance, but made no public statements supporting Earth's position. The Nelvorians, despite being victims of the attack that precipitated the crisis, were too dependent on Concordat protection to break ranks openly. Yet beneath the official responses, a current of unease spread through galactic society. Ordinary citizens across dozens of worlds had grown accustomed to human innovation, human medical care, human cultural exchanges. Markets trembled as investors realized how deeply integrated humans had become in the galactic economy. Scientists worried about research projects suddenly deprived of human intuitive leaps. Diplomats privately wondered who would mediate the next inevitable conflict between traditional rivals. What no one predicted was humanity's next move. 3 cycles after the withdrawal announcement, as the last human diplomats departed Concordat space, a final transmission arrived from Earth. It contained no message, just a data package, complete schematics for human FTL drive technology, advanced medical nanites, agricultural enhancement systems, and dozens of other innovations humanity had developed or improved. Attached was a simple note in Ambassador Chen's handwriting. For the people of the galaxy. No restrictions, no patents, no controls. They had given away their most valuable technological advantages, not to governments but to the galaxy itself. The implications were staggering. The merchant cartel's technology monopolies became worthless overnight. The Quarians' carefully guarded scientific supremacy evaporated. The Thraxi military advantage, built on restricted weapons technology, was suddenly matched by potential advancements available to everyone. It was simultaneously the most generous and most devastating act possible, a fundamental restructuring of galactic power dynamics achieved not through force, but through radical openness. And then, silence. Human systems activated massive energy shields of unprecedented design, blocking all conventional communications. Human vessels disappeared from trade routes. Human outposts in neutral territory were abandoned. For all practical purposes, humanity had not just withdrawn, they had vanished. In the immediate aftermath, many Concordat leaders expressed relief. The unpredictable, disruptive humans had removed themselves from the equation. Traditional power structures could reassert themselves. The natural order, whatever that meant to each species, could be restored. None of us understood what was coming next. None of us recognized how deeply humanity had changed us, how dependent we had become on their chaos, their innovation, their fundamental refusal to accept limitations. We would learn. Oh, how we would learn. The void they left. The first sign that something was fundamentally wrong came 3 cycles after humanity's departure. The Nelvorians, still recovering from the Meridian attack, reported widespread failure of their atmospheric processing systems. Without human technicians, the specialized equipment that maintained optimal moisture levels in their colony domes began breaking down. Standard Concordat engineering teams couldn't replicate the intuitive maintenance procedures the human engineers had developed through trial and error. It seemed minor at first, an isolated technical issue that would surely be resolved through proper Concordat channels. But similar reports began emerging across the galaxy. The Vangari discovered their advanced weapon systems, partially designed with human input, developed cascading calibration errors when fired at full capacity. Quarian quantum computers, which had incorporated human-designed cooling systems, began overheating during complex calculations. None of these systems were entirely human technology, but all had been enhanced, modified, or maintained using human techniques that had never been fully documented, because humans rarely documented their innovations with the rigor other species demanded. They simply fixed problems as they arose, using intuition and adaptability rather than standardized procedures. The merchant cartel convened an emergency economic summit 60 cycles after humanity's withdrawal. The archived recording reveals panic beneath the typical formal language of commerce. Essential pharmaceuticals in 17 systems have become non-viable, reported Trade Commissioner Volmar, his typically immaculate plumage disheveled from stress. The base compounds require cultivation techniques developed by human biochemists. We cannot replicate their methods. The Orion shipping hub has lost 30% capacity, added another representative. The routing algorithms developed by human logisticians cannot be maintained without their constant adjustments. Nothing was documented. They did this deliberately, hissed a Thraxi trade officer. They integrated themselves into our essential systems, made us dependent, then abandoned us. The accusation was both true and false. Humans had indeed made the galaxy dependent on their innovations, not through conspiracy, but through genuine helpfulness. They solved problems because they could, improved systems because they should, and rarely considered the long-term consequences of becoming indispensable. Grand Minister Elker finally recognized the severity of the situation. A formal diplomatic mission was dispatched to the edge of human space, broadcasting on all frequencies a request for renewed dialogue. The mission returned without response. The massive energy shields surrounding human systems remained impenetrable to both communication and surveillance. By the first anniversary of humanity's departure, the consequences had expanded beyond technical failures to fundamental social instability. Without human mediators, long-standing tensions between rival species flared into open conflict. The Vangari and Drellian border dispute, which humans had successfully managed for decades through informal channels, erupted into military skirmishes. The resource-sharing agreements in the Cygnus sector, which human diplomats had continuously adjusted to maintain balance, collapsed entirely. Most concerning were the reports from frontier worlds previously protected by human intervention. Without the deterrent of potential human response, exploitative practices resumed at accelerated rates. The Nebulonians, whose rights humans had championed, found their resources stripped by corporate interests. Pre-spaceflight civilizations previously shielded by human observation missions suddenly faced unrestricted interference. The Concordat attempted to adapt, to fill the void left by humanity's absence. The Liraxi deployed additional diplomatic teams. The Quarian established emergency research initiatives to reverse engineer human innovations. The Vangari expanded their peacekeeping operations to disputed territories. None of it worked. The galaxy that had functioned for 14 millennia before humans arrived found itself unable to maintain stability without them. It wasn't merely their technology or their diplomatic skill. It was their perspective, their approach, their fundamental rejection of the limitations that other species accepted as immutable facts. 2 years after humanity's withdrawal, the situation reached crisis levels. Supply chains collapsed across multiple sectors. Medical facilities and frontier systems closed for lack of essential treatments. Armed conflicts erupted in previously stable regions. Even the Concordat's central governance began to fracture as blame and recrimination replaced cooperative dialogue. The recording of the emergency session that followed is perhaps the most important document in our archives, the moment when the galaxy finally confronted the truth. "We face existential threat," Grand Minister Elkar stated bluntly, her crystalline form dulled with stress fractures, not from external enemies, but from systemic failure. "Our civilization is collapsing." For once, no representative disputed the assessment. Even the Thraxi, who had championed humanity's exclusion, remained silent. "We must acknowledge reality," continued Elkar. "The humans did not make us dependent on them through malice or manipulation. They offered solutions we eagerly accepted. They identified problems we had normalized. They challenged limitations we had accepted as inevitable." She paused, her crystalline structure vibrating with what my species would recognize as profound regret. "They made us better, and without them, we are reverting to what we were. A collection of species more concerned with maintaining our comfortable hierarchies than with genuine progress." High Commander Vexurian of the Thraxi, architect of so much anti-human sentiment, rose slowly from his seat. "I propose," he said, voice uncharacteristically subdued, "that we formally request humanity's return to the Concordat, with full acknowledgement of our misjudgment." The motion passed unanimously. The first such vote in Concordat history. A delegation comprising representatives from every major species traveled to the edge of human space, broadcasting a continuous message of reconciliation. For 60 cycles, they waited. For 60 cycles, they received no response. On the 61st cycle, a single human vessel emerged from behind the energy shields. It transmitted no identification, no diplomatic credentials, just a simple message. "Ambassador Chen will receive representatives aboard this vessel, 1 delegate per species. No weapons, no recording devices." The terms were accepted immediately. 12 delegates boarded the human ship, including, remarkably, High Commander Vexurian himself. What transpired during that meeting was never officially documented. The delegates agreed to honor the human requirement for privacy, but the outcomes became clear soon enough. 3 days later, human communication channels reopened. Human vessels reappeared on trade routes. Human representatives returned to key diplomatic posts, though not to all their previous positions. Human colonies remained consolidated within their protected space rather than returning to shared systems. Humanity had not forgiven, not completely. But they had chosen to re-engage. The terms of their return were unprecedented. Humanity demanded and received formal recognition as equal partners rather than junior members of the Concordat. They established direct oversight of interspecies protection protocols. They required transparency measures that many traditional powers found deeply uncomfortable. Most significantly, they insisted on fundamental reforms to Concordat governance, replacing rigid hierarchies with flexible, adaptive systems that could respond to crises without endless deliberation. Many of these changes had been previously proposed by human representatives and rejected as too radical. Now they were accepted without debate. It was not a human victory in the traditional sense. They gained no territory, extracted no reparations, demanded no punitive measures against those who had wronged them. Yet they transformed the galaxy more completely through their absence and return than they ever could have through conventional power politics. As I finalize this historical account many cycles later, the transformed Concordat has achieved stability that would have been unimaginable before the human withdrawal. The rigid species classifications that once defined our society have gradually dissolved. Innovative hybrid governance systems incorporate the best aspects of multiple traditions. Exploitation of vulnerable worlds has been systematically dismantled through enforceable protection protocols. Humanity remains peculiar among us, still chaotic, still frustrating, still refusing categorization, but we no longer attempt to make them conform to our expectations. We have learned, painfully, that their difference is not merely valuable but essential to our collective flourishing. Ambassador Chen, now in the twilight of her diplomatic career, recently addressed a new generation of Concordat representatives. Her words serve as a fitting conclusion to this account. We left not because we rejected you, but because we believed in what you could become. Sometimes the greatest gift we can offer is our absence, the space for others to discover what truly matters. You did not need humans to save you. You needed to remember how to save yourselves. She smiled, that uniquely human expression that still confounds xenobiologists. But we're glad to be back anyway. The galaxy is more interesting when we're facing its challenges together. When humanity walked away, the galaxy held its breath. When humanity returned, we finally learned how to breathe.